turn to your gray hymnal and the reading at the back. It's number 585 by Marge Piercy. This is a responsive. I'll begin, and if you will respond with the words in italics. We must sit down and reason together.
Perhaps we should sit in the dark. In the dark, we could utter our feelings.
In the dark, we could propose and describe and suggest.
In the dark, we could not see who speaks, and only the words would say what they say.
No one would speak more than twice. No one would speak less than once.
Thus saying what we feel and what we want, what we fear for ourselves and each other into the dark.
Perhaps we could begin to listen.
The women must learn to dare to speak. The men must learn to bother to listen.
The women must learn to say, I think that this is so.
The men must learn to stop dancing solos on the ceiling.
After each speaks, she or he will say a ritual phrase.
It is not I who speaks, but the wind. Wind blows through me. Long after me is the wind.
My second reading is by the writer Margaret Wheatley. She writes, what if we were to be together and listen to each other's comments with a willingness to expose rather than to confirm our own beliefs and opinions? What if we were to willingly listen to one another with the awareness that we each see the world in unique ways, and with the expectation that I could learn something new if I listen for the differences rather than the similarities? We have this opportunity many times a day, every day. What might we see? What might we learn? What might we create together if we become this kind of listener, one who enjoys the differences and welcomes in disturbance? I know we would be delightfully startled by how much difference there is. And then we would be wonderfully comforted by how much closer we became, because every time we listen well, we move toward each other. From our new thoughts and our new companions, we would all become wiser. Last weekend in Portland, I was at part of a workshop at the Pacific Western Region conference, and the Wilsons were there, and Joe Walter. Were any other kids at people? Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, it was an amazing conference of all the 4 districts in our region, wonderful worship and workshops. So I was part of a workshop put on by our district healthy congregations team, non-anxious leadership in anxious times, which I've also spoken on here at this congregation. It's based upon the work of Peter Steinke, who is very much of a great thinker on how we deal with anxiety and disagreements in our congregations, but also in our personal lives. Well, there were 120 people in that workshop, so that indicates there's a little bit of thinking about that issue. And the participants named many ways that anxiety had impacted their own congregations. Some of those impacts ended not only in misunderstandings, but sometimes in a collapse of civility between members. Some ended with long-time relationships between the members broken. So the people in the workshop asked, how can these relationships between friends and longtime members be repaired when we have some often deep-seated disagreements? What resources do we have in our Unitarian Universalist religious communities to respond to anxiety and conflict and make our communications more civil and more productive. Well, as I was at home planning for my part in that workshop, I found myself rereading Karen Armstrong's 2010 book, 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. Many of you are familiar with Karen Armstrong. She's a former nun, and she's a self-described freelance monotheist. She's the author of more than 20 books on world religions. And she believes that we need a deeper understanding, not only of our differences in our religions, but of the common thread that runs through all religions, and how that thread, which most of us know as the Golden Rule, can contribute to greater harmony between nations, religions, and also individuals. Well, Armstrong's book was published 10 years ago after she was awarded a TED Prize. And TED, many of you are familiar with that as well. TED is an acronym for Technology, Entertainment, Design. And TED is a private organization known for its annual conference on, as they call it, ideas worth spreading. The conference brings together innovative thinkers and doers who present their ideas around science, business, the arts, or global issues facing our world. Presentations can include music, performance, or even comedy. And the award goes to an individual TED person who believes that they believe has made a difference, but who can make even more of an impact with a $100,000 prize and the granting of one wish to change the world. Past recipients of the TED Prize have included former President Bill Clinton, the physician Raj Panjabi, and musician and humanitarian Bono. Well, apparently the TED Prize was not awarded to the woman in a recent New Yorker cartoon. Her husband asked her, "Any word back yet from the TED conference?" as she rehearses her video presentations of things my cat can do. Well, Armstrong accepted her prize at that TED conference, and at that time she said, "One of the chief tasks of our time must surely be to build a global community in which all peoples can live together in mutual respect. Yet religion, which should be making a major contribution, is seen as part of the problem. All faiths insist that compassion is the test of true spirituality, and it brings us into relationship with the transcendence we call God, Brahman, Nirvana, or Tao. Each religion has formulated its own version of what is sometimes called the Golden Rule, and we know that as always treat others as you would wish to be treated yourself." Armstrong continues, "In our globalized world where everybody is a neighbor, living the Golden Rule has become an urgent necessity." So what one wish did she have, along with her $100,000 prize? What one wish did she have to change the world? She said, "I asked TED to help me create a charter for compassion to show that despite our significant differences, it is indeed possible for the religious to reach across the divide and work together for justice and peace." Well, that's easily said, but as we all know, it's not so easily done. Every day on Twitter feeds or in the headline news, we can see the lack of compassion on the global level in conflicts fueled by greed or lust for power. And this happens not only in the political world, but between and within our own religious institutions. Terrorists use religion to justify various atrocities. Religious leaders ignore the sexual abuse of women and children by their own clergy. Others punish those who do not follow the teachings of the one true religion, which of course is their own. So instead of holding up the universal golden rule as a criterion of true faith, some religious leaders wage holy wars based on rigid doctrines established by single-minded authorities. And those who deviate from those doctrines are often treated harshly, not with the compassion taught by their own faith's principles. So Armstrong used her $100,000 TED Prize to launch the Charter for Compassion. Her not-so-modest goal was to restore compassion to the heart of not only the religious life, but our moral and political life as well. Now, the ideas in the Charter came from thousands of people all over the world who sent in their ideas. And then the final draft was worked on and created by a multi-faith, multinational council of leading thinkers. So the Charter for Compassion seeks to change the conversation, making compassion a key word in public and private interactions, and for leaders and each one of us to be the change by engaging with the political, religious, and cultural conflicts of our time with hope and compassion. But what exactly is compassion? Some people confuse it with the word pity, which is a feeling sorry for others. But the meaning is much more nuanced than that. Compassion comes from the Latin and Greek roots, meaning to feel with another, to put ourselves in another's shoes, to feel another's pain as if it were our own. So compassion is a feeling with. It means we look into our own hearts, discover what gives us pain, and then we refuse to inflict that pain on others. How do you want to be treated? When you answer that question for yourself, then you can always treat others in the same way, in a spirit of open-heartedness and goodwill. The Chinese sage Confucius is the first person we know whose words are recorded where he spoke about what we call the Golden Rule. Nearly 3,000 years ago, he was asked which teaching his followers should practice every day of their lives. And he replied, perhaps the shoe, consideration. He went on, never do to others what you would not like them to do to you. Of course, each one of us has experienced compassion. A neighbor who comes with sympathetic words on his lawnmower when you broke your arm, or a group of friends whose support and companionship supported you when your mother died. Volunteers we see who are building homes even this week in hurricane-devastated Puerto Rico. Yet our modern way of life seems alien to actually living compassionate lives. Our world is intensely competitive, emphasizing and rewarding a me-first attitude. And this attitude is stoked every night on popular reality shows, television shows, whether it's surviving on a remote island or competing in the British Bake Off. If you don't want to get thrown off the island or hear that your English sponge was a total flop, we need to focus on number one and how we can do best. Success, even survival in a hostile world, depends on self-interest. Do you doubt that? Do a quick review of recent stories from Washington, D.C. and the latest jockeying to survive the political wars there. Charles Darwin did research and clarified the view of life as a brutal struggle, going back to the old philosophers, nature red in tooth and claw. Darwinians believe that we humans are inescapably selfish, genetically programmed to pursue our own interests, whatever the cost might be to others. And neuroscientists, more recently, have confirmed that humans are indeed selfish. Researchers point point out that despite the trappings of our civilization, each of us has an old brain passed on from our reptilian ancestors 500 million years ago. Those ancestors' actions were governed by what neuroscientists call the 4 F's: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and reproduction. The 4 F's are necessary for survival. And as proud recipients of these neurological systems, we can honestly say that we come by our "it's all about me" feelings very naturally. But over millennia, we humans have evolved a new brain, the neocortex that houses our reasoning, reflective powers, and nuanced behaviors. And those abilities we identified with our better selves. But the 4 F's did not go away. In the face of threats, our old brains take over. We're still programmed to respond instantly to danger, to fight mercilessly for our own survival. And of course, those dangers can come from any place and at any time. Maybe it's that person walking behind you on an empty neighborhood street in the evening. An unfamiliar dog running toward you. The person who questions your decision at a meeting of your congregation's social justice committee. Our response to physical and emotional threat is instant. It's natural. It's a biological safety mechanism evolved for our self-preservation. The hard part when we're threatened, the hard part at such moments, is to recognize what's going on inside us and step back and give our new brain a chance to kick in. And that is not easy. We have only to remember the major conflicts of our century and the last century to see how we have been and are swept up into devastating wars, fearing, sometimes even with good reason, threats from other political systems, other religions, other people. Our modern-day fears are not unique, and similar challenges have occurred in all human societies. Challenges from oppressive rulers, neighboring tribes, sometimes even from our own family members. Those we now revere as prophets and saints also faced challenges. But hopefully they did not forget the one teaching that underlay all religious traditions, that compassion is the ideal toward which we all should strive. Even in the face of loss and despair, we must continue to practice compassion until it becomes part of our lives. For Karen Armstrong, religions, rather than being part of the problem, offer an answer. She says, look into your own heart, discover what it is that gives you pain, and then refuse under any circumstance whatsoever to inflict that pain on anyone else. The Apostle Paul, the earliest Christian writer, said, always consider the other person to be better than yourself, so that nobody thinks of his own interest first, but everybody thinks of other people's interests instead. That was some of Paul's advice to the Corinthians in that part in the Christian scriptures. Buddhist meditation can enhance qualities of empathy and compassion through disciplined practice to help the mind break free of self-interest. And psychologists, which we can read about in books and articles, psychologists have shown that spiritual practices like prayer, meditation, and even practicing altruism can actually reorient the human mind. So the teachings of Jesus, the Buddha, Muhammad, Confucius emphasize that every person has the ability to reform or to transform him or herself. In doing so, each person can be a model of compassion and kindness in a world which often seems ruthlessly self-destructive. And by practicing that universal truth of golden rule, we open ourselves to others with compassion and goodwill. At the end of the day, Armstrong says, religion isn't about believing things. It is not about believing things. It's about behaving in a way that changes you, that gives you intimations of holiness and sacredness. And Armstrong believes we can change the world, beginning with ourselves. Her book, 12 Steps to Compassionate Life, is a guide for nurturing compassion in our lives and in the world. The steps she outlines are practical, but they're not easy. They require a commitment to developing practices that help us become compassionate human beings. Of course, with a title like 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life, the comparison to the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous will quickly come to your mind, and this is not accidental. Armstrong writes, we are addicted to our egotism. We cannot think how we would manage without our pet hatreds and prejudices that give us a buzz of righteousness. Like addicts, we have come to depend on the instant rush of energy and delight we feel when we display our cleverness by making an unkind remark, and that spurt of triumph when we put down an annoying colleague. This is how we assert ourselves in the world and tell the world who we are. And it's difficult to break a habit upon which we depend for so much of our sense of self. So, as in AA, the disciplines learned at each step in the program have to become a part of your life. The 12-step program does not depend on creedal convictions or supernatural beliefs. Armstrong agrees with the Dalai Lama, who said that whenever a person is a religious believer is not important, does not matter much. Far more important is that they are a good human being. And like AA, the effect of working the compassion program is cumulative. Each step builds upon habits developed in the earlier steps, consciously lived until they become part of one's daily routine. And necessarily they will take time. Unlike those makeover shows we see on television, we can't do it in 1 hour. The process of reorienting our hearts and minds is slow, it's incremental, and it's undramatic. Yet, Armstrong promises we will begin to see ourselves, other people, and the world in a different light. The first of the 12 steps is to learn about compassion in the world's religions, to expand our understanding of the teaching's universality. So subsequent steps continue through developing empathy, more compassionate listening, and speaking with each other, and recognizing that each one of us has a lot to learn. The final step is love your enemies, and surely that's the hardest step of all. At each step, Armstrong offers concrete practices to help cultivate our capacity for compassion. As Unitarian Universalists, we pride ourselves on honoring the worth and dignity of each person. We're leaders in the work to be welcoming to those of all racial, gender, and religious backgrounds. But each one of us can be better at understanding differences between our political values, even our understanding how we each see the way this fellowship moves into a future of growth and outreach, how our thoughts about that can differ. And that outreach and growth has the potential to change your religious community and your larger community here in Kitsap County, and eventually the world. Engaged listening and openness to new ideas is critical. So instead of building that fence to shut out a new idea or your neighbor's culinary creation, it actually might be fun to try something new, even though it seems unappetizing at first. You might even like it. I know that was my experience with sauerkraut. So, developing practices to activate our new brain and the reasoning and nuanced behaviors we identify with our better selves can be done alone, but offers rich rewards when you share this journey. Some congregations have small groups reading and discussing 12 steps to a compassionate life. And in those small groups, they share their own stories, their own challenges, and then they support each other as they develop each practice, and most importantly, discuss the ways these ideas that Armstrong presents can be taken into the larger community and into the world. Here at the Kids at UU Fellowship, you have a good start. You have a healthy communications committee that continues to work to help all of us better understand and appreciate each other, to offer opportunities to learn how we can better have those difficult conversations, agree to disagree, and to live within the spirit of KUUF's covenant. Look into your own heart. Discover what it is that gives you pain, and then refuse, under any circumstance whatsoever, to inflict that pain on anyone else. May each one of us, as citizens in this country, as companions in this Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, united by its congregational covenant, be the change in our world as we continue this human journey together. So may it be. Now I invite you to